Welcome to the first session of ICANN 9, focusing on strengthening our coastal atlas community. I am David Hart, Assistant Director for Extension with the University of Wisconsin Sea Grant Institute in the United States, and I'm co-hosting this session with Ned Dwyer with Ranby Consultants and based in Lisbon, Portugal. We'll have two parts to this session over the next 3 hours. The first is an interview with author and sustainability expert Marina Psaros, and that'll be followed by a panel conversation with 4 people leading coastal web atlas networks around the globe. The second is a showcase of 6 atlas projects with the intentions of sharing innovative work and sparking connections to grow ICANN. Let me start by introducing Marina. Marina Psaros is the author of the Atlas of Disappearing Places, Our Coasts and Oceans in the Climate Crisis, and co-founder of the King Tides Project, a global network of sea level rise citizen science and planning initiatives. Psaros holds a master's in environmental policy and planning from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and has led climate change action programs across the public, private, and nonprofit sectors over 15 years. Her mission is to unite science and technology with creativity and empowerment to solve our most pressing environmental issues. And so I am going to now transfer here and begin a conversation with Marina. And I was wondering if we could start by telling us about the Atlas and where did the idea for the Atlas of Disappearing Places come from?
Well, first of all, thank you, and good morning where I am in San Francisco, and good afternoon and evening other places. I'm really excited to be here. This is the community that I come from, and it feels great to be talking to my people. I had worked for NOAA for a really long time, and it was actually through working with the King Tides Project that the idea for the Atlas came about. I was approached by an editor at the New Press, who's my publisher, who really liked what the King Tides Project was doing, sort of the combination of art and science and place-based storytelling. And he said, have you ever thought about writing a book about this? And I thought, well, I hadn't, but now that you mention it, it sounds pretty exciting. And so through working with the editor and my co-author, who's an artist, we realized that what we wanted to do was create something really beautiful and really engaging to broad audiences and take a lot of what we were doing, sort of putting people at the center of their own experience and really telling place-based stories in an accessible way and do that in a book format. And really early on, we also knew that we wanted it to be an atlas. I grew up with Encyclopedia Britannica and with atlases, and I loved the fact that you could sort of dive into them in whatever way made the most sense to you, right? You can start with the visuals, you can start with maps or charts. There's often stories and terms that are defined, and I really loved that because my work at NOAA had been really working with a lot of local communities and people at sort of every level of knowledge around coastal issues and science, and being able to think about how we would talk to such a broad audience and different ways that they would get into the material, it just made a lot of sense to do it as an atlas.
Great, thanks, Marina. I just got my copy in the mail, and it's a beautiful book. And I was wondering if you might be able to give us a peek of some of the visuals and the range of content that's covered in the Atlas.
Yeah, let me share my screen. Hold on, let me figure out how to do that.
First.
Yeah.
Excellent, just presentation mode, perfect.
Yeah. All right, so I actually just have a couple of slides from it just to kind of give you a little bit of a preview of what's in here. Obviously this is the table of contents. I mentioned that the editor had approached me, Jed Bickman had approached me. I had been really focused on sea level rise. And so through a bunch of back and forth, we realized that we wanted to focus not just on sea level rise, but all of the coast and ocean climate change issues. So we bucketed it into 4 big parts. So changing chemistry. And with that, we also included plastic pollution, because it is the fossil fuels, which a lot of our plastics are made out of, which is then, in turn, changing that basic chemistry of the oceans, all the way through strengthening storms and what that does to the frequency of hurricanes, to warming waters and changes in large regimes and melting of ice sheets, and then finally to rising seas. So my co-author, Christina, so I mentioned that it's terribly blurry. I'm so sorry, everyone. Squint a little bit and we'll just see if we can work that out. So my co-author painted all of these maps that you'll see here. So this map, she painted them on seaweed. So she went out and harvested a whole bunch of seaweed, dried it. It's all 1 cell thick, and then she painted over it. And what she painted was probably a lot of the data that a lot of the folks on this call have been, procuring and putting into atlases. So, oh, well, and then some adorable diatoms and other dinoflagellates and sort of small sea critters. And let's see, this is New York. And so what you see here, the red that she painted is always the sort of danger sign, right? This is what's at risk with sea level rise in Manhattan, what's going to be underwater. Oops, there's New York, yeah. This is 150 years of cyclone paths and named storms. So those that are smaller than actual large cyclones, but they're still named. And she painted this across the seaweed, and it's just I think it's just such a lovely approach to data. And it was so interesting to go out and, we knew the stories that we wanted to tell in each of these places. And then we went out and probably got all of the data from all the folks on this call. And then she then retransposed that through paintings back onto seaweed. It looks like those are the images that I had from there. So that's just a glimpse of what it looks like in the atlas.
Yeah, a beautiful mix of art and science, very distinctive. I was wondering, what audience did you have in mind when you conceived the book, and what was the overall aim of the book?
So the overall audience was my mom, basically. So we wanted to write to non-experts, so people who aren't experts in the science or the policy or oceans, but who are interested in what's going on and what our future might look like and how they could be a part of some of the solutions. And I think, when I think about what I want readers to walk away with, it's been, it's such a scary, hard world we live in right now. And I think people just feel really helpless about a lot of big issues. And so I want people to be able to leave with some sense of hope and also a sense of reality, right? Like, we are losing people and places and animals that we love, and there's still a lot left to save. And so how do we get to that point where we're starting to think about what are realistic futures under different climate scenarios, and how do we start doing that saving that we need to do? So in each of the chapters, there's a little future fiction section. And what we wanted to do is kind of spin out what the world might look like in 2050. Hopefully I'll still be alive. My children hopefully will also still be alive, giving me grandchildren at that point. And that's, that's in my lifetime. That's basically like the day after tomorrow is 2050. And we wanted to make sure that all of those stories use technology or policy, mechanisms that we have today. So all those stories of the future are sort of these little tiny portraits of things that could be and hope that we can have and solutions that we have already.
Great, thanks. It's wonderful to think of starting with somebody you love and connecting with that audience first and then expanding from there. I was wondering, how do you decide on the stories to include and also what not to include? And is there any one story that really stands out for you, and why would that be?
So, oh my God, this was basically an issue until we went to print. We had so many amazing stories. So my background is in science and policy. And so I knew about a lot of the issues at stake. I've lived in a lot of the cities that we chose. And so I wanted to find like a good representative mix of places that people knew, like New York, and then some like Bentray that maybe were not as high up on the awareness. And we wanted to make sure that it was, urban spaces and rural places. And we actually even have a couple that are in the ocean so that they're not people centric. Like we have a whole chapter on the North Atlantic. And so, I mean, we were literally like up to print. We also had way too many. So we realized a couple of chapters in that it was going to be like a 600-page tome, just like a doorstop, unless we whittled it down. So this is our attempt to get a representation of geographies, sort of science and management issues, and places that people would recognize and those that they might be, may not know, but might be interested in either going to someday or had some sort of attachment to. And the story that stays with me is Pisco, Peru, probably. That is really the story of ENSO, so the Southern Oscillation, and the Humboldt Current. So the anchoveta, which is a pelagic fish that lives in the Humboldt Current, it's basically called the ENSO fish, right? It requires the upwelling system to be able to, flourish. And when I started researching ENSO, I thought about I thought about the anchoveta, and I realized that it's such an interesting like critter because it unites rural pig farmers in China with like commodities traders in New York City with like prenatal yoga instructors in Los Angeles, right? So this fish is not really consumed just raw or for itself. It's made into like commodities and, animal feed and fish oil tablets. And so you think about this like tiny, humble little 5.5-inch fish that's just swimming along there and how much of an impact it actually has in the world. And so for me, that was the kind of story that we wanted to tell, like really uncovering the connections about how, how a change in this current system has these rippling effects all through the world.
Great. I know in the book, I'm really looking forward to checking out the Houston section, and that's because I used to live in New Orleans, and I'm interested in how much similarity there might be between the story you told about Houston and what I experienced in New Orleans. If you considered publishing the Atlas as a digital resource, and what led you to decide to publish it as a physical book rather than a digital resource?
So, we definitely always conceived of it as a physical resource. My co-author is a painter, so she is very tactile and, very in the physical world. We relied heavily on digital resources. And I knew, we knew that we wanted it to have a sort of object quality that you could flip through and look at and really engage with. But I also always knew that I wanted to have some sort of digital companion. So, each chapter has like a really specific format about the place-based story, the sort of science issue and the jargon that's often used around that, and a future story. And so what I would love is to create a digital resource or, partner with a platform who can enable anyone to write their own next chapter of the Atlas. What's the issue in their community? What are the potential solutions? What are the things that people love that they're losing and they want to save?
Sure. And I'll end this focus on the Atlas with a question. What was the most unexpected thing you learned in research and compilation of the Atlas?
God, microplastics, all the plastics, marine debris. That was like a real slog for the research. Every time I thought I was done researching, I had like a new question and I had to go engage in another entire like gross set of literature and science around like waste management and ghost nets. And so I learned a lot about plastic pollution, actually.
Great, thanks. Thanks so much, Marina.
Thank you.
Turn it over now to Ned to continue the conversation with a focus on the King Tides project. Thank you.
Thank you.
David, hi Marina, nice to have you here today. I think we could talk about your Atlas all afternoon, so it's a bit of a shame we have to curtail that. But look, I think many people will be getting a copy so they can delve into it in more detail.